So good evening. I'm going to call us to order at 6:32 for our LCAAC meeting. And so we'll go over roll call first. And thankfully this is being recorded. I'm also going to check with Ann Dameron if you're okay to be taking notes. Fabulous. So we checked in ahead of time. Michael has, as he's shared, some wedding planning stuff that's going on. All right. So let's see here. Brian.
Present.
Excellent. Ann. Okay. Yeah, audio's good.
Present.
Excellent. Kevin.
I'm here.
Great. Devanshi.
Present.
Thank you. Nishi.
Present.
Excellent. Yen. Okay, Yen not here yet. Okay. Divya.
Present.
Excellent. Okay, great. Calvin. No. Okay. Anna.
Here.
Great. Twisha.
Here.
Thank you. Marinelle.
Here.
Oops. Okay. We can hear you that you're there, but it was a little scratchy, so we'll see how it works. All right. Crystal. No Crystal yet. Gabriella. No. Larona. I think I have a full screen, so I'd be able to see. Michael, we know is excused this evening. Ivy.
Here.
Great. And then for our non-voting members, we have Steve with us.
Present.
Great. And Assistant Superintendent Salinas.
Present.
Excellent. And Trustee Jones.
Here.
Wonderful. And I do not see Trustee Campbell. Okay. All right. So that concludes roll call. Letty, did we have any public comments submitted this evening?
We don't have any public comments for this evening.
All right. So we are moving on then to our minutes from our meeting a couple weeks ago. So now would be the time if you have any adjustments to be made. So if you've taken a look at that, anything that needs to be adjusted? All right, so I'm not seeing anyone with amendments. Is there objection to approving the minutes from May 6th? Any objection? All right, seeing none, you have approved the May 6th minutes. And we're moving on now to agenda item 4. So we are looking for approval from this committee, which will then go to the trustees, because as the school board, they always have the final say. But we are bringing to you the proposal to amend our bylaws to include one additional member that is a parent guardian member of the Native American Studies program. So Native American parent guardians have a Native American council. And this was previously approved at the equity team. And so we're bringing that to you. Letty, did you want to share a little bit more on that?
Oh, yeah, sure. So we, there was a request to start to look at including more parent representatives. And so I know our board took action to approve a member to the equity team that is a member of a Native American student, excuse me, the parent of a Native or guardian of a Native American student. I do want to share, we do have other parent PACs, but I think this is really a group that we can certainly include. The good news is that historically we have done a specific input gathering with this group of parents, but I think it'll be nice and actually very much needed to include them as a member of this committee moving forward.
Thank you. And then Steve, am I wrong? You've actually put some data together as well for our district. Do you have anything offhand that you wanted to share?
In regards to the Native American study group?
Yeah, I think you've put some graduation percentage information together, as well as just first, it doesn't have to be detailed, but because you do so much work with looking at demographics, I just want the committee to be aware that it's very appropriate for this representative to be included in LCAAC. So I didn't know if you had anything that you wanted to share in general.
Well, I would share two things. First of all, a lot of our data, all California state data, includes American Indian and Alaska Native as a student grouping. So our reports will often include that as one of the, if it is 13 ethnicities, or no, sorry, 11 ethnicities. Additionally, in the LCAAC draft, which you saw one version, and then you're going to see another version tonight, we referred to the Native American group within FUSD as one of our parent groups who contributed feedback on district LCAP goals.
All right, excellent. So we would be, with your approval, we would be just copying over the language that was done for the equity team. Not reinventing the wheel there, and then submitting that for approval to the school board. So this would just be, if anyone is not in agreement with this recommendation, now would be the time to voice concern or ask questions. All right. Okay, so seeing none, is there objection to approving the amendment to our bylaws to go to the school board? Okay, all right, so seeing none, you have approved that recommendation to amend our bylaws, and we're now going to review the draft LCAP. So I'll hand it over to Letty and Steve.
Yes, thank you. As was shared, we attached, you know, a big shout out to all of you as a thank you, but also to Steve Musto, who has been working diligently with our business department and with a lot of folks. And so tonight, Steve's gonna show us an updated version, but we wanted to be able to give you something on Friday at the time of posting. And so Mr. Musto there has shared the doc there for you all to access. And then I'm gonna have him walk us through it. What's easier, Steve? Do you want us to share the screen, or what's gonna be easier?
I'll leave it up to the group, but I'm fine either way.
Would you all like to look at it, and as he walks us through it so we all see each other, or do we want to share the screen?
Just because, Letty, there's an updated version, I'd like for the screen share, just so people are able to see the updated version and have access, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great.
No problem. So I will share it now. I did put a link in the chat, and I'm hoping this link can be added to the agenda as an updated version as well.
Absolutely, yes.
Well, I think we'll just put it in the minutes, Steve, instead of updating the agenda, but then it'll get posted.
Okay. So let me give everyone a quick little overview. Can everyone see it now?
Yes, we can see it.
Thanks. All right, so this is it's a Google Doc of a template that is provided by the CDE. The CDE LCAP template was revised. A little history lesson: the first LCAP was the 2017 LCAP, and this was a much longer document. I and everyone else who has to work on these is very thankful that it's much smaller than it used to be, because it's less repetitive. But it's an outlet that a template that we will submit to ACOE for their approval, in addition to getting our board's approval. And we've already had our first conversation with ACOE about goals and things like that. So I'll kind of go through a lot of the things quickly, because I imagine what you're most interested in this group is the budgetary decisions that are made. So I'll go through.
Sorry, Steve, did you want, because I think you just scrolled from the first page, did you want to take questions? So we're looking, I think, at too many pages perhaps to stop at every page and ask questions. Would you rather you'll give the whole overview and people can make notes maybe on what their questions are and the page for reference. But I think if we stop at every page and do questions, that might be a little bit too long. Is that okay?
That's fine. So I'll keep it as abbreviated as possible as I go through. It is 35 pages, but you kind of get into the pacing of it after when you get to the goals. All right, so we'll start with a plan summary, just general information about the district. This section here, reflections, successes, and reflections identified need. And the third part is the LCAP highlights. In these sections, it's kind of a look back and look forward. So reflections are things that have gone well and things that maybe changed since the original LCAP from 2017. These sections are not complete yet, but we've done the kind of minimum of what the state and ACOE would like us to do. We plan to flesh out this narrative as we go through the next few weeks, getting to a final draft that will be presented to the board by the end of June. That will be things that you'll find in this. So think of it as kind of a table of contents. Next is comprehensive support and improvement. This is a term that not many of our teachers or administrators know much about, but it is a designation for schools that have not met certain metrics. And we have one school that is in a CSI, and that's Robertson High School. Through one metric, which was graduation, which it was a less than a percentage point, we unfortunately fell into that designation. So we provide CSI support, and there is a small amount of funding that is part of this as well. Next is stakeholder engagement. This is part, had a pretty complete part, but due to some notes from the ACOE, we changed the format a little bit from the one you saw linked on Friday to this one. But if you think about that chart we presented to LCAAC a few weeks ago about feedback from the parent groups and the surveys. This is kind of a narrative form of that. So ACOE wanted us to distinguish between the goals and the groups that were presenting those goals as well. Several pages. Then you get into the goals. So there are 4 goals, as we've discussed previously, and within each goal, there's action items within the goal. So for goal 1 is provide an educational environment conducive to learning. And you see kind of an explanation. We start each one with the state priorities, and then related to state priorities, supporting data. Supporting data is mentioned here, but is also part of the measuring and reporting results. Reporting results is kind of they used to call it just the metrics, and this was a report that the LCAAC usually looks at yearly. We haven't looked at it since fall of 2019 because of the pandemic, really. But previously the annual update was done in the fall, and now it's kind of moved to the spring. So that's why we haven't necessarily looked at these more recently. All the data you find on here is the most recent data. So a lot of the times you will see 2018-19 here. The reason for that is, again, because of the pandemic. Right here is about CAST scores, which is the science test taken in 5th, 8th, and high school. Well, we haven't had that administered until right now, so we don't have results from last year. All the metrics related to things on there. Then you get into the actions. So these are the sub-goals, if you will. One of the bigger changes format-wise that we made from the last LCAP to this LCAP is that we did consolidate some of these actions. I think we had up to 9 for especially this goal number 1 previously. We were able to coalesce these into 5 for this time. You'll notice on the goal number 1 for actions 2 and 3, there's no money listed there. This is a little confusing, but there is money associated with this. But part of the state priorities is talking about adequate personnel and resources and facilities, and talking about materials and things. So materials, for instance, a lot of this funding comes from the lottery funds. That's not an LCAP fund. So it's not listed here, although because it is part of the state priorities and part of the metrics, we do have to include it as one of the action items. And this box here where it says contributing, it's either empty or it says yes. We'll get to that at the very end of the report. But all monies that are considered contributing, these are monies that are explicitly for unduplicated students. So this is money that is resources that would not exist if we're not for the LCAP and are going directly for unduplicated students. As we move along to goal number 2, same format. You've got your state priorities, you've got your format here, many metrics. Goal 2 has a lot to do with student achievements. You'll see things like CTE pathways, A to G completion, and then get into the actions below. Each of these has funding associated with it, except goal action item number 4. These happen to be the FTE you find at the classes that are not supported out of LCAP funds, but out of the general fund. Goal 3 is our longest goal. It has many metrics associated with it involving school environment, so chronic absenteeism, average daily attendance, some student achievement things. So there's some CASB results as well, especially CASB results for some of our schools with higher numbers of unduplicated students. And then this one has 10 action items to it. The goals 3 and 4 have significant more of the funds associated with it than the first 2 goals. So we can go through each of those goals there. I'd like to point out though, for goal number 10, so 3.10, and then also 4.1 and 4.5 in the next one, even though these are LCAP funds. And when we, Letty, do you want to talk about that now or at the end?
No, we can talk about it now. What we're in the process of doing is ensuring that we're adhering to the priorities of looking at counselors. And we also realized that we were looking at reducing the amount of funds towards special education. So we're working very close, as those of you that don't know, so Raul Parangown, who is one of the retired associate superintendent for our district, he's back. And so he's working with Steve and I, and certainly Raiz Abbasi, to make sure we have the closest numbers and allocations. So tomorrow I'll be meeting with him, with Raul, and certainly the superintendent, and with Raiz and Steve, to try to make sure that we balance out these numbers. But right now we wanted you to know we are still prioritizing the counselors and then looking to see how much money is left, so that the possibility of the social workers as well. But we don't have the exact numbers yet, but we will at the time of publication on Friday. So I wanted to give that update.
Yeah, so this goal number 10 is important because there is support for the special services department. So if we're going to shift things around to support the hiring of social workers and counselors, as Letty said, we have to make sure those are covered as well. If not from LCAP funds, then elsewhere. Finally, we get to goal 4, partnerships with families and community. Here's a lot of interesting metrics on here about suspension rates and expulsion rates. One thing I'd like to note that is currently not noted in the narrative but will be added is there's something really unique, not unique, but special going on with suspension rates. Granted, last year was a unique year, but we cut the suspensions for FUSD in half last year. And we went from 1,000 in 1819 to a little less than 500 in 1920. Granted, again, you cut off the end of the year, you're going to cut off some suspensions as well. But those gains are very noticeable, especially at the elementary. There are some elementary schools really dropped with their suspensions. And when I started to look into this further and ask around to the elementary principals, this was not an accident. This was by design. That we have talked about in this group about restorative practices, although restorative practices usually focus more on the secondary level, those lessons learned by the administrators and the teachers at the elementary level are paying dividends. So we want to make sure that's reflected in the final draft. Go down here to the action items. So right here, you have a gap here. There's nothing for funds for Action 1. It is here we hope to include the social workers as part of the, I believe, is the mental health plan that Letty and Greg Bailey and are working on in our department. And then this last part here, which is action item 4.5, currently we have 27 counselors in the district who are funded through the LCAP. Our goal is to increase those numbers based off the feedback of this group, of literally every parent group we talk to. Counselors are very popular. So that is where we're hoping to be able to add to these numbers here to be aligned with those. Analysis. And then the final section is this increase or improve services, where it's marked yes. Those numbers will be tabulated, and there's a formula. The state can't help but give you a formula, percentage to increase or improve services. So that fits into that percentage there. And then we finish out the narrative about why those things were chosen. Spotty at this point until we have our final numbers. So that's it for the LCAP. Lots of details within it, and our goal when we come up with a final draft is to make sure it's reflective of the work that we've done. There's a lot of positive things that we can point to, and there's a lot of areas where our community has been very clear where they want to see things change. So we want to make sure this document is representative of that.
Thank you, Steve. And I think just before we get to the questions, so just as a summary, so the next steps would be tonight we'll answer questions. We'll be able to look at this document. This document then will be sent over for our board to look at as that's a public hearing on next week on June 3rd. Is it June 3rd or June 2nd, Steve? I apologize. Second, thank you. On June 2nd, that will be our public hearing at the same time that our regular budget is actually going as a public hearing as well. And then the board will be able to ask questions about it, give some further direction, and then we would bring back a final LCAP for adoption at the June 23rd board meeting. Also want to share that the Alameda County Office of Education will also be looking at it again. And so although we met with them once and they gave us some support, they're doing that with all of the districts because, as you can remember, we had a lot of projects this year with the LCP, with the ELOG. And so what the county has said is that they're going to look at it again sometime between now and our public hearing, and then be able to support us so that the final product, it has the county also looking at it by June 23rd. And that's what they're doing for all school districts as well. Thank you.
Would it be preferable to stop presenting or to have it up as I answer any questions?
Let's leave it up in case there's a specific page for now, Steve. And then once we get into any more kind of more general discussion type of things, then we can go ahead and pull it down. Ivy?
Thank you, Steve, for the presentation. I have a few questions. Well, the first question, which is something you just mentioned, how are elementary school students suspended last year?
How are they, or how many?
How are they? I mean,
You mean the reason, Ivy, or what is the process?
What is the process? Because it's all online learning, so distance learning. So how are the students suspended? I'm just curious. I mean, it's just something came up.
I apologize. I'm sure there are examples of suspensions last year, this year, but I was referring to 1920 when I was talking about those suspension numbers.
Okay.
So most of the input I got from the principals was prior to distance learning.
Oh, okay. Okay, my first question is on page 1. Well, okay, in the second box, when you talk about the breakdown of the student population, it mentioned with 0.6% of our students identified as homeless. I don't know if I don't know. I thought that all the homeless, don't we address them as without permanent housing, or are we homeless?
So this is there's a bit of a conflict between the standards of our school district and the standards of the CDE. To the CDE, homeless is still the term that's used.
Okay.
So generally for state documents, we will include homeless.
Okay.
Obviously, if the board would prefer otherwise, we can talk to ACOE about that.
Okay, that's the first question. The second question is that the total budget based on this presentation added up to about $14.8 million. And so that's about $1.5 million off the expected funding, 16.3 million. Okay,
Yeah.
and
So
yeah.
Those three gaps in 310, 41, and 45, we have projected numbers there. However, you are correct. We are short of that until we get a final approval from the cabinet on what we want to present to the board. We are short there. But and just to reiterate for everyone, the total budget for the LCAP this year is $16,348,705.
Okay, 16. Okay. So
So Steve, you mentioned one of the pockets was social workers, for example. So you identified for us the few areas that are still going to get filled in, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
those areas, but they have numbers in them already. So those are going to be adjusted, right?
Yeah, so in the original draft I provided for Friday's update, it did have some numbers in there.
Really?
So let's go to 310, for instance.
Yeah, 310.
Here we go. Actually, let's go to 41. It's a little easier to explain.
Okay.
So right now, a percentage of the student support staff, which is the student support services staff, which is Greg Bailey's department, are purchased through LCAP funding. This is important because those are positions. Examples would be, help me out here, Letty. We have the translation services. Well, actually,
Translation services, yes.
Child welfare and attendance.
Thank you. Yes.
So we have those positions that without the LCAP would not exist. So those are part of 4.1. It is our hope to increase that budget to include social workers as well. We're looking at, in addition, includes funding for Healthy Kids Survey, which is actually not a very large amount, and Where Everybody Belongs, which is a program done for incoming 6th and 7th graders at middle schools. So those things exist, and we have a number for what it will cost for the LCAP to include those next year. But we're hoping that number increases so that includes the social workers, which is why we're leaving it blank for at least tonight's presentation.
Okay. My last question, let me tell them before I forget. So okay. My last question is like at the board meeting last Wednesday, Letty mentioned, okay, you went over the E-log presentation, and there is 20 point, how much is it? Let's see, $21.8 million from E-log, and 8.1 million of that supports student social and emotional health. 11.6 million from that money is to accelerate process to close achievement gap. So I'm just wondering, are there overlaps between the E-log funding and the LCAP funding? And since E-log is a one-time funding, and how are we going to sustain some of the things? If once E-log is gone, how are we going to sustain it with the LCAP dollars?
Right.
Yes, so good question. So we were very purposeful as we were eliciting feedback from the community that things that went into the E-log, recognizing that it was one time. So for example, the social emotional, a lot of that is one-time funding tied to some contracts with our community-based organizations where we will do, the way that the state really put it out was you have to get ready for students to come back onto campus. So what extra support do you need one time, as per what they said, to really give a boost to families and students and our staff as students start to come back onto campus. So we are outlining a lot of short-term contracts with community-based organizations for counseling, a lot of support in terms of curriculum purchases, where we can purchase curriculum like the social emotional learning curriculum one time. But we've also put in a lot of professional development for all staff to build that sustainability piece, where we don't necessarily have to put it in the LCAP because we're training our staff, and that's the sustainability piece. There is some one-time money in there for counseling though, and let me give that distinction. So in the LCAP, we're proposing, more counselors, but the counseling is really going to be based at the schools that have the higher counts of unduplicated students, because that's what the LCFF monies are for. But we also know that schools, even with lower numbers of unduplicated, are going to have a need. So we're going to use this ELOG one-time monies to help to support for 1 year, and giving some more counseling services to our elementary schools and our secondary schools, knowing that we are going to have to reduce it back. So I think as we were thinking about it and hearing from our community and from all of you, the sustainable long-term funds are really in the LCAP, because focused on the unduplicated, and the one-time monies are in materials and supplies, curriculum purchases, or just in helping to give all schools something for this first year back.
Okay, so there's no overlap. So
Right, I understood, Ivy, your question. So philosophically and goals wise, that's what Letty and Steve are saying. Yes, absolutely. We have certain goals and we're applying funding to those goals, but there's no double counting of the same item for both funds.
great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivy. Divya.
I have other questions, but just piggybacking on what Ivy asked, regarding the, I missed the previous meeting, so I may have overstepped on some things, but I just wanted to know, when FUSD was thinking about bringing the kids back to school earlier this year, there were some funds which we have allocated to that, and there were some of the things that we have already planned, right? And now again we are trying to put some things in order for the kids to come back. So do you think there are some overlaps here?
So Divya, you might be referring to like the ESSER grants. There was some CARES Act funding, that sort of thing. So that was between $18 and $19 million. And that money had a number of listed items that the district could use it for. And so some preparations were made, like I'm sure Steve has a nice plexiglass if he looks out and sees people that are, in cubicles. So that sort of thing is not money gone to waste, because it's going to still be used, right, when we do come back. But other items that might have been purchased if we had gone back, those funds instead were spent on other items for the district that will have been completely utilized. And business services could give us a breakdown of those funds, but that was a separate amount of money for a little under $19 million. This is the LCAP, of course, is our about $16 million, as Steve said, that's ongoing, and that's in addition to the ELOG funds, which are the $20+ million one time for next year.
So will there be any review of these funds, how they are spent? I'm not sure if we are the right forum, but it's interesting to see, because we were really ready to go for opening the schools sometime earlier, and then we did spend some amount in the schools and for training and all these things to really get back into action. And now again we are doing a similar exercise, right? Just wanted to know if there is a way for us to learn about those.
Yeah, so
We
I
could ask, but it's not really in the scope of this committee, because what you're asking for actually is more a comparison between the one-time funds for CARES Act and ESSER as compared to the ELOG one-time funds for next year. What is important, like Ivy just noted, we don't have any duplication of things that we would be approving with either of those grants. But I think that that's certainly something we can send out. I don't think that we would spend time in it in this committee, but I think it's definitely something that the business office could run, and Steve or Letty could send it out to us, but it wouldn't be something we would agendize for our purposes in this committee, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally understand, Victoria. Okay. So my original questions, I was just piggybacking on Ivy earlier.
Sure.
So regarding section 3.5 and 4.4 in the actions, so the ELD and the multilingual things and the teacher training in 2.4, do we have any overlaps in the student support staff that we are looking here?
So you mentioned 3.3?
3.5 for ELD.
Oh, 3.5. Yeah.
And 4.4 for multilingual support, Spanish, Farsi, and all. And then
Yeah.
2.4 for student support staff.
Okay, so 2.4, which is, sorry, I apologize. Did you say 2.4?
Yes. Teacher, that is for training the teachers, I guess.
I believe that's the GLAD that we had talked about. So one sort of training here for one of the items is actually really intensive multi-day practicum and training for teachers, and it's done from elementary through, I took it as a secondary math teacher, on doing things that are really amazing for English learners, but work really well for multimodal engagement strategies for all students. So that's one type of training. But then here, when we look at action 5 on this one, the ELD specialist, that's actually a separate position. So we have specialists that we pay for that assist teachers with reaching students that are English learners, and those are actual positions that are paid for through LCAP funding.
And the 4.4, so the ELD and the 4.4 thing for multilingual, those don't have overlap, right?
So that is actually multilingual. It's amazing to have our own staff be multilingual, because this action for the goal 4 is actually how we can best outreach to families and parent guardians. So it could be multilingual. For this purpose, it could be a multilingual secretary in the office. It could be a multilingual, it could be translators. It can be all sorts of staff that are multilingual, not specifically looking at their job title, but in fact, the more that we have in the district, we're really able to help reach families, as well as doing other items like testing.
Yeah, thank you there. Yes, I got it.
Awesome. Did you have any other questions, Ian? Okay. All right, excellent. So, okay, I think we're good then, Steve, if you wanted to go ahead and pull that down. So thank you so much for the presentation. And I know it can be a bit complicated, but Assistant Superintendent Salinas did a great job of also talking about how ELOG funds and the description that we've seen at the school board meeting, and they're going to use how we can use those one-time funds to actually bolster the things that we're going to be doing with our ongoing funds. And I am personally crossing my fingers, because in the May revise, they did talk about potentially grants coming behind ELOG and doing some other things that may be one time, but we can't as staff count on that happening. So I think we've really struck a great balance with our plans for some amazing ongoing things, totally utilizing the one-time funds to supplement in something that isn't going to be like a flash in the pan. So we could continue to use one-time funds the following year, but also it wouldn't fall apart having used one-time funds. So thank you so much for sharing on those items. Was there any other discussion or general questions that we wanted to ask of Letty or Steve on LCAP?
Looks like Lorona has her hand up.
Oh,
Victoria.
thank you.
Her-
Okay.
Her real live hand.
Okay, thank you so much, Anne. I missed that. Lorona?
Yes, so thank you. My question is for general fund. I wanted to know for extra funding, are you guys also making sure that you guys take care of the elementary schools and the middle school and the high school with what they say special education based on reading? Like assisting just for reading, because that's a huge issue.
Yes, so Steve or Letty, did you want to highlight the goals and actions we have in there as well that's specific to and that's separate from just ELD, which we talked about, and of course, but other students that we and some of our goals and actions that might target reading as well.
And Letty will probably have a bigger perspective than I will, but one thing I would like to highlight is goal 2.1 directly involves my department, the assessment department. And one thing, another source of funding, to really get confused, is the LCP, which was given to school districts at the beginning of the school year. We ended up purchasing a new assessment program that we launched this year. It's called iReady. It's an assessment program, so it's another test for students to take, but I do think it will give us more consistent gauge of how students are progressing on standards, including reading standards. And one thing I'm excited about for next year is that we're going to be able to use the iReady in place of a dyslexia screener. So California law a couple years ago mandated that school districts have to assess in early grade levels for dyslexia. We did a test at the beginning of the 2019 school year, which wasn't the easiest to administer. As a result, it was kind of slow getting the data. Now we'll be able to use this assessment program and then some follow-up things for students who are identified within that program. So I think it'll be more efficient in identifying students who may need to be screened for dyslexia. So one thing I'm excited about for how these funds are going to be used to help reading instruction.
What if they don't have dyslexia though, and just started off like learning how to read later? Like, you know how some kids may go to transitional kindergarten at 4.5, where they teach them how to read, but then you have other kids that didn't learn how to read until they probably was like 7 years old. So that's what I mean by that. Like, at each different like sites, in stages in life, some kids learn earlier, then some learn late. For those that are late, that's why I was asking. It's like, because nowadays you have some kids that barely know how to spell their name, and especially when it's pertaining to like reading for like young boys, they start off late.
Yeah, so in addition to the screener, just so we're able to identify who all the students are, and we will be doing that screener at an early age. The second part is intervention funds. So that still continues. So we're still going to be distributing intervention funds to the sites directly for small group intervention, if it's a small group after school, before school, or pushing in. Which means that a teacher or a support person would push in to support in the classroom. But then also going back to that ELOG. So we have set aside additional monies there for more support. And so this summer we are having a focus on math for academies, but we knew that wasn't enough. So we're actually expanding that to have more after school, before school intervention fund monies at the school sites. And then also next summer, a very much expanded summer program with those one-time monies, knowing that this year is going to have to be a boost for all students. So not just the students that are in special ed or students that have been screened for dyslexia and identified, but for all students that just need that boost because of not being in-person schooling for a year. So that really is the purpose of those funds. So we will be using those to the advantage of our students.
Okay.
Also, it's not something that was asked in a previous question about the ELD specialist in working at sites. We have 5 of them. One thing I think would be good next year is to kind of flesh out some of these things that are already in place, because I saw a demonstration of that right before we went to distance learning at Warwick, which it's at 5 different schools. They're doing amazing work there. Now, obviously, they're doing such good work that we'd have to expand the budget and find a place to hire more. But it's nice to see when you've set a goal and you're seeing successes that it's replicable in other schools. So I think if we can find models of things that are working, that's something for this group to explore in the years to come with our budget priorities.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Lauren, did you have any other questions?
Yeah, and one more thing. For middle schools, are you guys, that's transitioning from 7th grade to from 7th grade to 8th grade, and also 8th grade to 9th grade? Are you guys focusing on or can assist with students with time management?
That's actually a great idea. So I will pass that on to our secondary principals. We are adding, going back to the e-log. So again, this transition. So we are adding to what they call web activities and also the link crew. So it's really peer-to-peer under the direction of activities director and our teachers, leaders. So we will be having money given to the secondary sites to help with that transition for our incoming 9th graders, our incoming 8th graders, and 7th graders, because some of our kiddos have not been on campus. And so I will pass that on about time management. Absolutely.
Please do, because they done got a little lazy now. So we got to reprogram them all over again.
Yeah, and I think Lorona too. I don't know, Steve, if it was when you were at Irvington as well, but we did a summer program that bridged to, and we would just have 4 kind of courses, but it was really so that teachers could also do activities with kids and then kind of see how they organized, because it was just a couple weeks long, but you really get a fabulous sense of kids' organization, how they approach the day, having to go through even just a few hours of, I did math, but we did more fun activities, but still, how do they write on a page? How do they find that page tomorrow? So I think that, yes, the web activities and the other summer programs, Lorena, would be great to extend next summer as well. So academic success is very little having to do with strict academics in a lot of sense. It's those sort of organization and readiness is a huge barrier sometimes. So good points.
And skill techniques too, because certain kids have different learning styles, and then I think it's important just to learn your learning techniques. And if you are audio learner and stuff like that, they got certain programs that could teach kids where they could look on the internet, and then they could sign on, and you can find out time management, note taking, and all that type of stuff. I think that'll be important to add that to academic wise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would just say one thing as part of the e-log is looking at social emotional curriculums, which for elementary schools, that's not going to be as controversial, but secondary schools, we don't necessarily have a good tradition of incorporating those within core content classes. I think this is an opportunity, and I'm really glad you brought this up, because I live with a 12-year-old who struggles with time management skills. Wow. But this is something that we can't go back to business as usual. And I think it's going to be a challenge for everyone who works in our district, is how are we going to change things we did in the past, that how do we incorporate the new things that are expected of parents? So I think this is a discussion that we should continue. What do parents want to see in schools? Sometimes it's mostly academic, but sometimes it's stuff like this, and that pays dividends in the long run too. So I like that suggestion.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Lorena. Ivy.
I just want to address Lorena's concern, because we've been working with the school counselors who are asking for help, tutoring support for students who need help. And I think, there are a lot of students in our school district who are very good in different subjects. And they're very willing to share their experiences and skills and knowledge with other students. So we've been seeing students signing up as tutors to help other students. And that's how school counselors have been reaching out to us. And we've put together, because privacy concern, we don't know who these students are. So we just give them the list of tutors to the counselors, so the counselors can share it with their students and families. This way they get connected, and it's just working very well. So you mentioned earlier about community support. I work with many different community groups, and there are many people who are willing, more than willing to help. We're all going through a hard time together, and people are finding in their heart, you know, something that they want to help with, and a lot of times they don't really know where to start. So if there are people, students who need help with tutoring, one-on-one tutoring, you know, skills, time management, because sometimes students learn the best from other students. They have role models to look up to. So maybe it's something we can talk more, maybe with Letty, or I don't know, because I've been talking to the school counselors. They came to us, so that's how we started the conversation. And we don't really know if we want to continue this, because since we don't really know how it's working out on the other end. So if we can get some feedback about that, we can probably make it more feasible for more families. Yeah. And also I have one more question, not related to the LCAP thing. Is there going to be a sign-up form, volunteer sign-up form for next year? Because our term is up.
So Ivy, that's actually its own agenda item. So we're going to stay on our agenda, and we're going to finish up here an LCAP discussion, and then we'll go through. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Anna.
I was going to speak to Larona's concerns. I have a son who's on an IEP, although he's very high functioning. He had struggled with note-taking and organizational skills, things like that. And because he was in resource or core support classes, he is now in high school, all of his resource teachers have taught him, and they continue to teach him and the other students in his class, time management skills, organization, note-taking, things like that. And they actually put them through some of the practicals. So we already have some people who are already experts on how to teach kids how to do that, but it's in a smaller form because those resource or core support classes are smaller so that kids can get more of the information, but we already have experts in that area. So maybe we can tap on into some of those teachers saying, what are the best practices for this type of thing, and see if we can replicate that throughout our schools, not just the core support or the resource classes, but throughout. Just letting you know that it already exists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. All right, so I'm not seeing anyone else in the queue, so thank you so much for this update and then the timeline, which was shared but is also on our agenda, so we can see when that's going to the board and for its final approval. Excellent. All right, thank you so much, and we're going to move on now. Because Ivy's ready, I could tell. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go through in this. I wanted to say it was in no order, but actually it's in alphabetical order, kind of by first name. So I did look through just attendance this year, and this is only for our appointed members by the board, because labor groups have their ability to choose their own, and obviously staff is outlined in our bylaws. So I'm just checking in. If there's anyone who is resigning at this point, then you would also want to let us know so that we can put you down, because that would create a vacancy. And this will be in addition to the 3 vacancies that we already have listed. So we currently online already have listed a vacancy for a community member, a vacancy in the Irvington attendance area, and a vacancy in the Mission San Jose attendance area. So this is in addition to those 3. We're just checking to see for our current members as well. So we want to, as a committee, we would be approving any other vacancies, and that still goes to the board and they decide or not. So I am bringing forward that both Gabriella and Calvin have not attended at all this year. That's one position in the Washington attendance area and one in the Irvington attendance area. So we do have in our bylaws, of course, there are extenuating circumstances, and I've heard from, you know, a handful of you, all of those things happen, but we have not yet seen them this year. So unless there's objection, I would be submitting those as vacancies to the school board. The goal is to, of course, get vacancies filled by August so that we would have a full committee by starting in September. Okay, thank you, Brian.
And also, Victoria, if they haven't noticed, the roster is on the agenda. So if you scroll back up to the top, the roster is there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I wanted to remind Anna, because quite a few of us, when the bylaws were redone, we started in August of 2019. Anna, as Kennedy, volunteered to take a 3-year term. So her term is not up. So Anna, unless you're resigning, you will continue on. Okay, excellent. Okay, and then Anne, of course, is a CSEA rep. You would let us know, your union know, right? Same for FSMA, Brian, and myself. We all started in 2019. All right, so Trustee Campbell, I'm not quite sure how it works. We'll let the board know. Trustee Campbell has only been able to attend once this year, and so we'll let the board decide if they wanted to appoint another trustee or not. She has been with us for 2 years, but normally trustees go until they switch over in December. So that would be a board decision if perhaps and we have a lot of things going. So perhaps Trustee Campbell had a conflict, but we've only seen her at one of our September meetings and not since. All right, so Michael is not here this evening, but it was for a noted reason, and he is another who had signed up in the beginning for a community member 3-year term. So we'll just check in with him and make sure that he's okay with that.
Where does it have that? Because I'm looking at the rosters, and so it.
Yes. So we actually
correct.
It's back in our September 2019 minutes.
Okay.
So we at that meeting had to solicit, and it says in our notes that we were actually asking for 2 community members and 2 parents to sign up for a 3-year term. The other community member, other than Michael Gardner, actually resigned midterm, and that is the position that is unfilled. So it would actually be, up to the board. The goal, of course, is to be evergreen, but at this point, it probably doesn't matter whether it's just goes back to a 2-year term.
Yeah, I think it'll be. I know. I'm sure the board, and I don't think Trustee Jones got back on, but I'd rather we'll just be able to present it all to the board together, and that way.
Yes, Trustee Jones is in the waiting room, Victoria. She would like to get back in.
I would love to let her in, but I don't have the key to that waiting room.
I don't either. No, I don't either. That's so strange.
Oh
no. I don't know if Mr. Zamora can, but I don't know if he can see it either. This is what we had the trouble with.
This always happens when they're not logged into the account, the email, the calendar invite has been sent to. So just have her double check that, and then she should be able to get in.
So maybe clicking directly from,
from the invite. Okay.
All right. So Divya, you are still in the middle of your term. Because you started here with us just this school year, so you're continuing on. There isn't anything there. Ivy, so your 2-year term is up, but I'm just taking notes if you are interested in continuing, because then the board can just sometimes they'll appoint new and do a new ballot just for vacancies. So I just want to, in my report to the board, share those that are willing to just continue on with their term.
Yeah, I'm a slow learner. It usually takes me about 2 years to get a handle on things. So I'm finally kind of getting.
We don't want to miss the best of you, which is just yet to come, Ivy. Okay, excellent. So I'm going to note that you would like to continue. Excellent. Okay, great. Lorona just began with us this year, so your term is not up. Marinelle, you started with us in 2019. Are you still interested in continuing?
I am not sure.
Okay.
Is it possible for me to get back to you on that?
Yes. So I just want to be able to give a report to the board in the next month. I just want to have it on their radar so Letty can post it and we can get it to the board by August. So
And I do want to share that I also remember we are advisory to the board, so I would update the board, and so there may still be a preference for applications, and I don't want to give a false hope on that, but I think it will be really important for the board to know who would still like to continue. So I want to make sure that they still have that oversight.
Thank you.
And then Twisha, you began technically midterm, even though it was in 2019, but in October of 2019. So the 2 years is up. Are you interested still in continuing?
Yes, definitely interested.
Okay. All right. And so that is it for this portion. So I'm going to have those notes, and then I can work with Letty to have that sent so the board we can get, you know, anything posted for the board as needed. Any questions on that? I'm going to wait 26 minutes for questions.
Victoria, can you, or Assistant Superintendent Salinas, can you clarify, does DLAC reapply? Does DLAC select? What happens for Kevin?
DLAC selects their own representative as well.
Okay, so Kevin, you would let DLAC know whether you wanted to continue or not. Because as everyone said, it takes a couple years on this committee to understand what it is, where it's going, how it works, and then the state changes the report. So
yeah, the DLAC, I think the next DLAC meeting will continue this conversation. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin.
But so far, I'm going to continue unless they say something else.
That's wonderful. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. And Trustee Jones, you joined us just in time. Oh, Divya.
So I have one suggestion. Since I joined this year, and easily the first 5 or 6 sessions were a huge learning opportunity for me. It would be great for any new members to have a quick learner session or something which gives an overview of what we are going to cover, how this is going to be, etc. Of course, I did read whatever was given on the FUSD site, and I did have some background when I was getting in. But once I came in, it was, oh, that was huge. I mean, the new things which are coming in and all, every session is a new learning for me. And of course, I sometimes ask so many noob questions. I don't want to waste the committee's time, but things are so new that I don't even understand at what level you're discussing sometimes. So in order to get there, I sometimes ask those questions, and sometimes I don't know if my questions are relevant also. So that's where I think that if any new members are coming in, if we can have a quick training session, maybe a half hour or a 1 hour session, to give them an overview of what is going to come, what is expected out of them, etc., that would be really helpful for our committee too.
That's a great idea. I know that typically, this has been such an unusual year, but typically, even when we have new school site council members, there typically is like a school site council training that happens in districts. But I think for sure we can definitely make note of that. And I'm looking at Mr. Musto, but next year we'll have Dr. Rocha back, so we'll have our full team and we can definitely do the training. I think that's a great suggestion.
Yes, and I just want to add on to that though, that no questions have been silly this year because we all needed the trainings on things that were happening on LCP, E-log, the new reporting. So all of that was very useful for all of us. But yes, if and when we get back to regular times, definitely is a great idea, Divya.
One more thing, Victoria, actually, for all the information that we are discussing, I know that you keep posting the information before the meetings, and we also have a location where we can check. But it would be good if we can have a central repository of all the information that we have been discussing, so that anytime that we want to go back and refer to, it would be good for me to check. Because some of the questions that Ivy asked, she always refers to the previous year's things and from the previous meetings. I don't have that background, and I always rely on the current agenda, and I only check from the current discussion points. But that is really needed, the way that she refers to the previous years, right? So that insight is really needed for us anytime that we are doing this. So of course, the experienced members will be able to bring those points, but at least the new people, it takes some time for us to get there.
Thank you, Divya. Yes, and I think we can check to see how far kind of back things are housed. I know that we just right now, like other committees sometimes have previous years of housed materials, and our committee just has the 1 year and the linked documents. So maybe there's a way to have, like you're saying, something that would be able to be referenced, and then we'd have comparison points for that. So so that's a good idea, especially because we're ending this year. At least we could start by housing this year's information and not having it go away from the website and just start with next year. So this is a nice transition point to decide how we'd like to do that.
Yeah, besides, we already have all the information stored here, right? Because you were already posting everything online. So that would become easier for us to do next year.
Absolutely.
Yes, and I'll speak with my support person and with Bart Payne, who helps us to make sure things are posted. There might be a way. I'm just trying to think of what that page will look like, and I'll let them see if there's a way. But I like the idea of moving forward. I don't know about the history, but moving forward for sure, we can do that.
Yeah, awesome. All right, well, thank you so much. And not seeing any further hands in the queue. So this is it, right, for this year for our committee work? Okay.
Yes, this is it. And thank you. Thank you, Victoria, for chairing. I think a lot of times it's hard, I'll tell you, to balance chairing and being on Zoom. And here's to next year, maybe we'll be in person. So that's what I'm hoping. That's the plan.
Yes, absolutely. So then we'll just make sure that however the board posts, then we'll reach back out to confirm for those of you that did express continuing interest, or let you know how that's being handled, or whether you're being approved to continue on for another term. So we'll reach out, and then you'll get the dates for the next year. Generally are decided by August for when we start in September. So that will be it. And then I encourage and invite all of you to watch the school board meeting and the public hearing and kind of see that process get approved, because it's a lot of our hard work that's going into that. All right, and with that, we are adjourned at 7:39. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Bye.